Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. In my video today, what I want to talk about is the vocabulary of the soul in Old Norse, or in a somewhat surprising twist, a little bit like how Norse myth doesn't mention the aurora, the fact that there really doesn't seem to be a separate concept for the soul as separable from the body in pre-Christian Norse belief. Any culture, approaching any other culture, tends to import a certain amount of its way of framing the universe, or whatever is under discussion. And in Judeo-Christian, or the sort of post-Christian culture of the modern West, there is this notion of the soul as a separate part of a being from the body. Even among people who no longer believe in the soul, there is still an understanding of the concept, right? Your body might die, but some invisible part of you, some energy or something, is going to go somewhere else after you die, maybe to heaven or hell, maybe to be a ghost, maybe to be reincarnated in some other flesh, something like that. But the pre-Christian Norse seem to have no concept, anything like this. In discussing the afterlife of any particular being in a saga or in a myth, in our Old Norse sources, without exception, they do not mention the soul going somewhere. They say the person goes there, right? He went to Valhall, she went to hell. He lived on in his grave as an afturganga, the sort of Norse equivalent to zombie, instead of any sort of discussion of the body rotting away with the soul going somewhere apart from it. This makes it actually very difficult to translate anything involving souls into Old Norse, because there just isn't this word for that separate part. Now, subsequent to Christian influence there is, right? People complain a lot about Christian influence on Norse myth, but actually one of the biggest influences on Norse myth from Christianity comes today with people trying to read in these Christian or post-Christian concepts into those medieval Norse sources which aren't there. Now, in the centuries after the Vikings converted to Christianity, let's look especially at the 1000s, you do start to see concepts of the separable soul come in. You see this word soul, or sola, which is imported direct from the Christian society that the Norse had the most contact with originally, the English. Of course, this is sawol in Old English, which becomes the English word soul. You do start to see that used in a very early Christian poet, such as Hallfredr Vandræ the Skald, Hallfred the trouble poet. But you don't see it in pre-Christian texts. And you do start to see repurposing in those texts of words like ond and andi, which actually don't have to do with a separable part of your experience, but rather with your breath. The ond or andi is originally the breath as a sign of life. This actually isn't too different from the older uses of those words, and of words of similar conception, like animus and anima in Latin. But it's only in that Christian context that these start to become that separate being, rather than just a sign of the life that is in the being as a totality. The closest thing to a word that actually expresses that inner experience, even though it's not necessarily separable from the physical experience, is the word hugr in Old Norse. Now, hugr is often translated as thought. It is, of course, in a variant form, a weak masculine form, hugi, the word that we see in the name of one of Odin's ravens, hugin, the thought, paired with munin, the memory. Now, hugr, though, is used of internal experience without that internal experience typically being separable from the body. Let me show you what I mean with a quotation from Havamal and an indication of how difficult it can be to actually even translate this word into English in some cases. This is stanza 95. Hugr ein that veit, byr hjarta nær, ein hann ser seva. Engi sott veri, hveim snotrum manni, and ser engu at una. So the hugr The soul, spirit, if you will, alone knows that which dwells near the heart. Byr nær hjarta. He is alone. Now this he could be the hugr, the thought, since it is masculine, with itself, ser, around the mind, seva. Now, without even going further into this quotation, what are these different words meaning here, right? Hugr versus hjarta versus sevi. They all seem to be words for internal experience. So, in a sense here, really, hugr can almost be translated better as just you. You are the hugr that's inside of you. You are the being that experiences your internal and external stimuli. So, in my translation of Havamal, I've continued to translate this, even in the revised translation coming in the Wanderer's Havamal, as only you know, because you are the hugr. Only you know what dwells in your heart when you are alone. One is alone with the mind. When the mind is alone with the mind, hugr is alone with the sevi. Notice also we have an example of hugr kind of just meaning the person in stanza 91. Bert ek nu mali, því at ek bæði veit, brigðar kalla hugr konum. Þó ver fegurst malum, ver flost hygjum, that talir horska hugi. Now we have hugr twice here. We have it in the nominative singular in line 3 and in the accusative plural in line 6. So I'll speak plainly now. This is after he's been talking about how faithless women are, because I know both men and women. Men's hugr, men's mind, thought, soul, if you will, is changeable toward women, i.e. men are changeable, men are faithless, men lie to women. When we speak ferris, þó ver malum fegurst, when we think most loose-stitched, most falsely flossed, that seduces wise hugrs, right? But in this case, the hugrs that men are trying to seduce are those of women, so that seduces wise women with their lies. In Havamal, a long, complex text, so of course we could find examples of lots of things. We do have an example, however, of the hugr being potentially separable, but notice what a special case it is. This is in stanza 155, during the part that we often call Ljóðatal, where Odin is talking about his different magical spells. He says, "That kann ek tíunda, ef ek se túnriður, leika lofti ó. Ek svo vink at þær villar fara, sinna heim hama, sinna heim huga." I know the 10th spell. If I see túnriður, fence riders, witches, play in the air, I work so, I cast a spell, that they go lost, fara villar, of their home skins, heim hama, of their home mind, sinna heim huga. Now in later Scandinavian folkloric belief, the soul of witches, often rendered with a word descended from Old Norse hugr, such as Norwegian hug, can separate from the ham, or skin, flesh, body of a witch to go somewhere else. And we even read of Odin doing something very similar when Snorri is talking about the magical spells Odin knows in Ynglinga saga. But this, notice, is a very special example. This is witches, or a god, separating from their body and sending their experience out to do something else. In this case, witches playing in the air, or according to Snorri in Ynglinga saga, Odin going and possessing the body of an animal for a while. But this isn't something normal for people like you and me. It's not something that's going to happen to us after we die. Anytime you read of someone who has gone, again, to hell or Valhalla or into a grave mound, it's the whole person that's talked about without any indication of the body and soul being separate. Think about in Helga Kvita Hundingsbana II, one of the poems in the Poetic Edda, where the hero Helgi returns from Valhalla at night, fully physically, to his grave mound, with scars on him, possibly from the battle that killed him, possibly from battles in Valhalla, and sleeps with his wife, and then has to go back, his whole self, to Valhalla the next morning, right? Or think about, I wrote this down, this is a somewhat obscure one. I wrote it on the wrong thing. There's another saga, I'll put the title on the screen, where a man encounters his father, or not father, but a distant ancestor, in his grave mound, and at the end of their encounter he says, "Well, I'll see you in Valhalla." So where is the old man right now? Right, he's in the grave mound, but he also apparently spends time in Valhalla, wherever exactly that's located relative to the grave mound. So instead of importing this Christian or post-Christian concept of the separable soul, separable body into Old Norse, we need to kind of get into the frame of mind that's actually suggested by these old poems and old sagas and see that they consider the being a whole that is not separable in that way, even after death. Well, I hope this has been a somewhat interesting or informative look at this question. I hope that if you're interested in Norse mythology, language, and other things, you'll check out my hundreds of videos about that on my channel. I hope also, specifically, that you'll check out my book called The Wanderer's Hávamál that will be coming in November 2019 from Hackett Publishing Company, publisher of my previous 2 books, and it will include not just a fully revised, more exact translation of Hávamál, but also the Old Norse text itself, derived directly from the Codex Regius, in a form closer to the manuscript than I have seen in any other edition, including the Multiplicity Online, and a commentary on the Old Norse text, and some extra text related to Old Norse concepts of Odin and of his Valkyries. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best.